Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, What is in Your Base Creo License? My name is Rob Romanowski. I'm the Director of Sales Operations with 3HTI, and I'm joined today with Garry Hoffman, the Principal of 3HTI, and I'll say close to a 30-year veteran of the industry. Gary's learned a lot over the years and has seen the evolution of Creo. And the purpose for this webinar is to really help anyone who's using Creo or ProENGINEER understand what they currently have in their license and what they would be entitled to if they upgraded, if they converted from a perpetual license to a subscription, and going through just all the different stages, some of the different stages of the releases of Creo to see exactly what's in it. So with that, Garry, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow you to take control.
All righty, Rob, thanks very much. And thanks for everybody to join us today. And I guess in the interest of time, we'll kind of move through this pretty quickly. So let me just share my screen, and Rob, let me know when you can see my screen. And I guess if we can we record this so we can distribute it in the fuge?
It is being recorded.
Excellent. So let me know if you can see my screen properly, guys. But and I apologize for a little bit of the off center. And this is going to be a just kind of a down and dirty and not lots of PowerPoint presentation. But what's happened, I guess the best way to explain this is, and as Rob said, good news or bad news, but in about 9 days, I will celebrate my 30th anniversary of actually joining PTC in 1990. Scary, time flies when you're having fun. But anyway, I think over the years, we didn't have a lot of stuff to sell, let's say back in 1990. And if you guys are looking here in the left is some of these individual, components, if you want to call them that. And just for fun, I actually kind of left these in the original nomenclature, which was Pro this and Pro that. But, we had different things in addition to what was called ProENGINEER. We had different pieces. We had Pro Feature that would make rounds and shells and drafts and things like that. Pro Detail that would do orthographic projected drawings, Pro Plot, which was a funny one because in the very beginning, we used to actually sell 3 different, what I'll call modules to use some of that nomenclature, which were Pro HPGL, Pro Versatech, Pro CalComp. Some of those things don't exist anymore. I think Pro CalComp and Versatech. And, each one of those, believe it or not, was $500. And if you wanted to buy all 3, we called it Pro Plot. And you bought all 3, Pro Interface were things like IGES, now it's STEP. Pro Report was ultimately when you create a exploded view, and that actually allows you to put the balloon notes and link a bill of materials. Pro Legacy was the ability to import 2-dimensional drawing files, things of that nature. And I remember way back in the very beginning, at the end of September 1991, PTC was just coming out with sheet metal, and sheet metal was actually something that you had to pay additional money for, believe it or not. And just for fun, all this stuff as a lock license would probably cost about $16,000, believe it or not. You can, we'll show you what some of the prices are today. We've added on Pro Welding, that's more welding symbols, some basic photo rendering capabilities. Web Publish is a little dated, quite honestly, but that was something that allowed you to publish HTML files. Library was something we used to charge for. You would buy library access, and then you would get access to mechanical libraries and connectors and things like that. Pro Ecad is still a pretty useful thing. And Pro Ecad is something that will allow you to actually import electronic boards, define keep-in, define things like skyline. You can actually map individual components. And then finally, Pro Program. And Pro Program is something where you can write if-then-else logic to do programmatic type of instructions in the product. And just for whatever it's worth, when we talk about Pro Program, a lot of people want to do things related to assemblies. And we'll get to this in a second, but if you want to do that, there is a thing called Advanced Assembly Extension, which I'm looking for, and I don't know where it is. It's down here. And as far as Advanced Assembly Extension, ultimately, that is what did kind of the real pro program. So just to kind of back up for a second. So one of the reasons we're having this is that over the years, PTC, we had a great scheme that was like, hey, you bought, this generation configuration. And if you want to get the extra stuff in here, then you will have to pay to upgrade your perpetual package. Pay us $2,000 and, then the package becomes more valuable. If you are just somebody that was active on support for all these years, then ultimately what would happen would be you wouldn't automatically, you might get something, but you wouldn't get all these new modules, or now what we call extensions, automatically. And, the paradigm has obviously shifted over the years. About 3 or so years ago, PTC has become a purely subscription company. And one of the pieces of their transition is that they will no longer let anybody with a perpetual license upgrade this to the latest and greatest configuration. So ultimately what happens is if you do have perpetual, you're basically locked in time, and as new things become available, there's no upgrade. There's really no ability to get that. The only way to get that is either to purchase a new subscription license or to take your existing active perpetual license and convert that to subscription, where they'll basically give you credit for what your subscription is worth, and then you will pay a reduced fee annually on a go-forward basis than what you would pay for a full subscription package. So I think just for fun, we actually have a customer in New Jersey that will remain nameless. And I guess these guys have a little bit of agita because this configuration here is what was called ProE Foundation. And, there's kind of like Son of Foundation, or just kidding, Foundation XE, Foundation Advantage, blah, blah, blah. And it's sort of slowly morphed over the years. But having remembered this working at a PTC actually offered this particular configuration circa June 1998. And when I went back to kind of research it, I had a lot of difficulty finding any information on it. So what we're trying to implore this customer is, hey, Mr. Customer, you should really upgrade this thing because you're missing a lot of just basic functionality. And then, really in, circa 2004 and beyond, you came out with another package. It was, probably Foundation XE, let's say circa 2008. I'll just make up, actually, no, 2012, excuse me. They had the Creo Essentials package, which was sort of the last perpetual configuration that we sold. And what I'm attempting to look at here is that Foundation would just be this limited set of modules, and Creo Essentials would actually contain these modules in addition to these separate modules. And again, there's been I think it's Foundation Advantage, Foundation XE, Creo Parametric, which was the name of a package, and then finally Creo Essentials. And you can see there's different things in here. So really what PTC is trying to do is they're sitting here and as a company, we used to use Microsoft Office. We still use Microsoft Office, but we would buy, Microsoft Office 2010, and maybe every 3 years you'd pay to upgrade it. And we finally bit the bullet and said, you know what, we're just going to pay for Office. And we get all this extra stuff in Office, whether it's Yammer or Microsoft Teams or, whatever it would be, OneNote, et cetera, SharePoint. So you get all this stuff, whether you want it or not, you get it. Some of the stuff's valuable, some of it's not. Obviously, we're not doing this in SharePoint, in Microsoft Teams. So maybe we didn't find a lot of value out of that. But there's really a lot of additional stuff that actually comes with these licenses. And what PTC's attempt is that if you have subscription, and again, you can kind of see where this ultimately stops, you basically get all this extra stuff in here that may or may not have some value to what you do. One of the big things of value that we hear back is that PTC provides an e-learning subscription, which if you bought this separately, this would be $725 annually. And that way you have access to any of the 26 different, self-paced, which would normally be a in-center training class, but they're self-paced via the web. And there's also home use licenses. So where e-learning kind of works well, if you said, hey, I have a question on surfacing, maybe it's on warp surface. You can just actually type in warp surface. That will take you to the specific training examples to help you, solidify your knowledge. And again, as far as a home use license, I've heard of some customers, a lot of customers today with COVID are using VPN to be able to access their license on a home computer. But ultimately, if that's problematic or you want to travel somewhere, you're disconnected, we're actually providing a license that either one or two people can use remotely from the office. And what we're finding out, this is actually kind of a big deal, which is why it's highlighted in dark letters. But just to kind of run through some of these things, you have, simple mechanism design that will allow people to go through range of motion. Model check is something that will basically check and make sure that you have uniform, proper modeling processes across, your constituents that use the product. Surface is ultimately advanced surface extension. Scan tools is something where you can actually take point cloud data and actually create, smooth surfaces to reduce the noise. Similar with warp. Assembly performance extension was something, again, that were in these packages post 2004. And it's interesting for this one client that does do assemblies. And, I've always wondered why they complained about PTC's assembly capability. And one of the points that PTC did in, let's say, 98 was to deliver this low cost package. And believe it or not, this package, I said originally in 1991, this was 16,000, eventually went up to about 26,000. And then, due to competitive pressures in June of 98, PTC came out with this package here. Believe it or not, that was a $5,995 package. And everybody thinks ProENGINEER, now called Creo, is expensive. But what PTC did was they actually neutered this thing and they took out all assembly capabilities. They ultimately created this little assembly performance that will allow you to do bottom-up assemblies. It won't let you do things like skeletons and zones and have multiple people work on assemblies at the same time. One of the big things, even though it says assembly, advanced assembly, or uses the word assembly, one of the big things that it doesn't do is it doesn't do what's called copy geometry, where if you're building a fixture or you're relating some geometry to something else, you're building a fixture maybe to hold apart, you cannot take that geometry and actually pass that to what you're creating. So there's a couple big deals that this doesn't do, but just simple, zones and, it doesn't do zones. Simple things like shrink wrap and some other assembly capabilities that this does is actually kind of a big deal. It does have, better photo rendering here, real time. Design animation is where you can actually take, what's in mechanism dynamics, go through the range of motion and actually create videos. Import data doctors, a little bit of a kind of a throwback, if you would, to being able to import data and make, proper 3D models to construct them with features. Web connectivity, it's ultimately that Creo runs, starts out in the web browser. Feature recognition tool where it will recognize a thing of pattern of holes, things of that nature. But ultimately, when we kind of get down in here into what's in the more modern type configurations, you get things like Unite, and Unite has the ability to bring in, I would say, if you would kind of draw a line right here, in about 2010, PTC came out with Creo. And just to kind of explain Creo is basically a hybrid or a combination of what was called Co-Create, which was originally HP ME10 and ME30. and it was also ProENGINEER. And they put these two things together and said, wow, this is going to be great. And I think what people have to kind of understand is that ProENGINEER came out, and it was purely a system that actually went through and you put in these parameters, if you would, with numbers, and that drove geometry. So geometry was really a resultant, if you would, of the recipe that went into. And what Co-Create did is they took a different tact, and they tried to kind of retrofit an old Boolean modeler and basically manipulate geometry and give it some intelligence. So really what Creo is really the best of both worlds. And I think what makes that really interesting is that if you want to pull in geometry from any CAD system, let's say it's SolidWorks or AutoCAD, you can bring that CAD geometry in. That other person can be still working in that CAD geometry, and you use it to reference your assembly, when ultimately that assembly is updated by pulling in the SolidWorks or AutoCAD or CATIA or whatever it would be file again. That assembly automatically updates. So you really have the real ability to actually work in a heterogeneous CAD environment, which has been something that's really beguiled CAD users since the beginning of CAD. And so that's really what Unite is. That's really with the advent of Creo. But what also really, kind of lights this thing up, if you would, is flexible modeling. And flexible modeling is the ability to actually manipulate the geometry, not manipulating the feature tree. So ultimately what happens is, if you want to really make some really radical late stage geometric type changes, where you can literally pull a feature, something like a boss, from one side of the product to the other, you don't have to be some genius and go in and try to manipulate this feature tree with all these parent-child relationships. You just simply pull it over and bam, away it goes. So for a lot of different types of modeling, that's a great thing. It may not be for everything, but things like, where you're doing tooling or mold bases or, a variety of other things, it's really very, very beneficial. And it also is beneficial because you can suck in the third-party CAD import and export, and you now can manipulate those, that geometry. But in addition, what you can also manipulate is you can start to assume certain levels of intelligence. So if you bring in a pattern of holes, this thing will automatically assume some intelligence with the pattern of holes. So instead of individually manipulating each hole, you can group things together, and it will actually take this imported geometry and add some intelligence to it. So pretty neat stuff. I think it's a different paradigm. I think there are ProENGINEER users that have been around since the 90s that really don't understand this stuff. And I think depending on the application, there's a lot of benefit to it. And just trying to, go down this list of features, you have Mannequin Light, which is for human factors, anthropomorphic humanoid figures, 5th, 95th, and 50th percentile. Advanced Framework is something where you're using more structural type members, extrusions, whether it's aluminum or steel. And there's a library of how you actually fit these together, and where they're going to do different types of joints and complex mitered joints. Then, of course, you go back here to ProWeld, where you're going to actually put in the welding symbols and things of that nature. CAM Light is a simple computer-aided manufacturing capability. Simulate Light is a simple, kind of freemium, we'll call it, for Creo Simulate. Same thing with mold analysis. How do you actually simulate the flow of Newtonian fluid? And if you don't know what Newtonian fluid is, it's basically water. So no, it's not going to be some ABS or polycarbonate or whatever. This one right here, Intelligent Fastener, I think is a really interesting thing, because a lot of people and what they design do use fasteners, and this is a way to intelligently assemble things together and manage, fastener libraries and things of that nature. Freestyle is something that actually does come with pretty much any newer release of Creo, and that's the ability to actually take and manipulate a kind of a ball of clay. I'm actually an industrial designer by trade, and if we were to do something, we'd take clay and we kind of mold it around, and we try to get some organic shape or whatever else we would try to get. And that's kind of like Freestyle, where you're just really pushing and pulling this, what I'll call amorphic geometry, and trying to make something that actually has some shape to it. So online component catalogs, a lot of that stuff really comes in terms of Thomas catalogs and various other things. Spark analysis is an interesting one because really with the advent of electric cars and a lot of electricity, it's really trying to look at conductivity with components that are near one another. We already talked about flexible modeling extension, and really these next four are all kind of similar, if you would. And I say kind of similar is we give you the ability to actually create a two-dimensional schematic that's intelligent 2 dimensions. So it sort of knows when you drop it around and drag it around, and that has different symbols in it. And the way this is supposed to work, if you're going to do cabling or piping, or what I'll say PNID, then ultimately what's going to happen is that you can now pick off this list of, let's say, wires, and you can basically 3-dimensionally point and click and route a spool of cable. So it might be a certain gauge wire, it might be a certain color wire. You might want to build in things like service loops and tolerances as far as how far from the assembly you have it. But you have the ability to basically go in, route this cabling, and then, or piping. So either something that's, either a cable or a pipe. And then ultimately you get this manufacturing, which is a pretty neat thing. And what that does is if you really explore how people do design, an engineer kind of, electrical engineer comes up with a 2D schematic, probably in AutoCAD, and all of a sudden some poor sucker is left on the shop floor to take a bunch of string and to take some type of breadboard or prototype and actually pull that through there. And then they have to pull it back out, and then they got to measure it. And then ultimately they have a nail board where they're actually going through and they're creating a collection of different wires and things like that, creating this wiring harness. So this really takes a lot of that guesswork out of it. And years ago when I was at PTC, I used to do a lot of business with Harley Davidson. I remember, I watched somebody lose their job at Harley because they refused to use this. And what they didn't realize is if you wanted to move the frame of this motorcycle a little bit, it wasn't an easy thing to have all these cables and pipes and hoses automatically update. But by using this technology, bang, away it went. So just to kind of round this out a little bit, what you have is you have different, again, this is kind of the old, this is kind of where we've been. This is an entry-level configuration today called Creo Design Essentials. And then we move up into the Creo Design Advanced. And as you'll see, what we attempted to do is to help our customers by, hey, you get this advanced assembly extension. We kind of talked about that already. And you also get prismatics and multi-surfaces milling, which is a, full-blown 3-axis simultaneous 4th and 5th axis positioning milling package. And you can kind of see it sort of go over to these other, more expensive configurations that are, what some people like to call all that in the kitchen sink. And, you'll have things like interactive surface design extension, which is really a free-form type surfacing modeler, similar to what industrial designers would do. Behavioral modeling extension, where you actually give it certain goals. Let's say you want to have a constant volume, and the system will go in and manipulate the parameters to ultimately keep a constant volume, for example. So some of the stuff gets a little more complicated. It's not necessarily something for the average user. Mechanism dynamics is going to give you the range of motion, but it's going to apply the forces and the dynamics. Things like additive manufacturing, which are going to do some type of matrix type of design that has some hollow spots or some voids inside of it. It may have some type of grid inside for 3D printing or additive manufacturing. Expert mold base, which are the actual bases that hold the tooling. Geometric dimensioning and tolerancing to look for tolerance stack up. One of the things, we had a call on this last week with a customer, was layout extension. Layout is something that kind of fell out of this Co-Create acquisition, which is ultimately taking a 2-dimensional plan view. This works extremely well, I think, if you're doing some type of machinery, production machine, because you're ultimately driving, 3D components, but you're looking at that from that top down, which I think a lot of people think that is very beneficial. Mold machining is high volume, major, fast in terms of getting rid of mold cavities and cores, getting rid of a lot of material. Tolerance analysis is similar to the GD&T advisor. Tool design is the actual ability to take and create a cavity and core and be able to pull that and separate that in the case of an injection mold. And then finally, you get Windchill PDM Link for data management. So just, trying to round up this one, you get things like MathCAD, you get full-blown Creo Simulate, Fatigue Advisor to see when something is potentially going to break. You get computational fluid dynamics here. There's a collaboration extension for CATIA and Siemens NX, which ultimately will allow you to put data, both suck data in from those packages, but it will allow you to actually export in a native format back to those packages. NC sheet metal for punching and laser cutting. Production machining essentially takes what is in the prismatics and multi-surfaces, and it actually does that, but it also adds turning and it adds wire EDM. And then you actually get sort of the enhanced form of this geometric dimensioning and tolerancing. And of course, your e-learning and home use licenses. And you guys can take a look here at, what the prices are. One of the things that I think, once upon a time at PTC, we used to charge an extra $2,000 a year just to float something versus locked. And then we got to a point where, hey, we'll just make everything float to make it easy. And several years ago, PTC went back to, at least at the lower end packages, of giving everybody something, that they can lock it. And the truth is, a lot of people aren't sharing licenses. They may want to buy one. Well, why spend the extra $500 or $550? So that's kind of what it looks like. This particular configuration here, what's happening is that as a small and medium business customer, we have the ability to discount this by an additional 30%. And what PTC is essentially looking at, they're trying to service somebody that is a small and medium business. We have a lot of single person operations, but if you're Caterpillar or Case or whatever, maybe you're going to spend something for $15,000. And by the way, if anybody cares, we actually have another configuration that goes for about $21,000 a year. So we didn't bother to put that down here because I thought it would be overkill. So that's really all I had today. It's a lot of information I just threw at you. I think the other thing to note is if you want to purchase, tool design extension, whatever it would be, what people tend to do is they tend to buy one of these two configurations, and then what they do is they add that on a la carte. So that's something that we can certainly do as well. So, and that's why I went through a lot of this extended capability. I'm not sure who's going to do all this stuff, but if there may be one person that needs to design a cavity and core for a mold, and in that case, you just add this this component on here. So I think that's it, Rob. It's all I had planned to cover today.
That was a lot in a very short period of time.
Thanks. Luckily, I talked quick. I don't know if we have any questions from the audience or where we are.
At this time, we don't have any questions. But I'm gonna, if I could take control.
Sure, absolutely.
For a minute to wrap up. If anybody has any questions, you can type them in. I'm going to share my screen.
Let me stop sharing, and away you go.
There we go. So just a couple of things. Just one thing is, we want to provide value for our customers, which is the reason why we're hosting this webinar, because we want to be informative and we want to help our customers model and make their products better, faster, and less expensive. So what we do as a service is we'll provide 2 hours of desk side coaching for our customers, so we can specifically help them understand Creo better, specific to your needs and how you model and whatever challenges you might be facing. So we're more than happy to have one of our engineering directors get on the phone with you or your team and help you through any problems that you may have. This is a service we provide for our customers. The other thing that we do is we also get from our customers projects, meaning that, like Garry mentioned, Creo is a la carte, and it comes with a lot of different extensions, and in a lot of cases it makes sense to purchase an extension with the base license, the base configuration, as opposed to buying a more advanced package with that extension in it. But the other option is, if it's not something that you do often, something that you do once in a while, whether it's analysis or something along those lines, we can do those projects for you in-house. So just wanted to mention those things. So there are no questions at this time, but if you do want to get in touch with us for anything, you can contact us at info@3hti.com. You can call us toll free at 866-624-3HTI, or you can just respond to the email invitation that was sent to you. Any responses to that email will come directly to me. So Garry, thanks a lot for your time today and that very informative and dynamic presentation. I mean, I thought it was great. I thought the information was great, the history of it. I mean, I even learned a few things that I didn't know before. Quite a few.
So that, remember, Rob, that and about $7 will buy you a cup of Starbucks. So, but anyway, hopefully it was helpful for everybody. I think there's, quite honestly, everybody's got a job to do, and it's not to figure out, PTC's packaging schemes. Unfortunately, that's our job. And I guess the way you look at it is, if you guys need any help demystifying it, we're more than happy. And ultimately, what I think our role is to ultimately help customers not spend too much or too little. And I think if there's something that's here that's useful, it's our job to inform you. If there's something that you're paying for that is of no value, then you shouldn't be paying for it. And that's really what we strive for. And I think with this paradigm, especially with subscription, that's really what it's about. And as I said, we as a company, we purchase software on a subscription basis, and you want to make sure you're not using too much or too little. And that's part of the benefit of subscription, is you have the ability to either turn things in that you're not using, and if you do need those, as you described, then you can simply come back and either add them at the point in time when you need them. But it's ultimately about right sizing what you have. And I think the other thing is that we're all super busy, and there's a lot of good stuff out here. And unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of time to go and learn things. So, if we can help you and we can help you with some mentoring, things of that nature, we're more than happy to do it. So thanks again, Rob, and thanks to everybody else for attending.
Thank you. And we will make Garry's slide available to you as I do have a request from a couple of people. We will make that slide available.
Yeah, real quick, Rob, too, the other thing is there's actually a second tab on here, and I failed to go into the second tab, but the second tab is a pretty decent, not for everything, but everything kind of down to advanced extension description. And I don't know where, I can't find my Zoom. I'm zoomed out. Let me just show you guys real quick one quick thing. I'll share my screen again. And the other thing too, guys, I guess in the interest of time, again, we could spend probably hours on this, but I actually have, there is a whole sheet of what comes with this. I shouldn't say sheet, it's a fairly elaborate presentation, so if we wanted to go in and, go over and cover Unite technology, we could have slid you to death, and I prefer not to do that. But if you guys do want some of this stuff, we can share this with you. That really kind of goes into a lot of detail. And then the other thing, just to show you this, is that what I put together, as far as this Creo packaging, we had everything that was here in terms of the packages, but there's a second tab here that says product details, and it's a little hard to see because it's a lot of stuff jammed in, but just to show you, if you wanted to go to sheet metal design, blah, 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 blah. Most of you guys probably know what that is, and it's a little question: do you design products that are made of sheet metal? Same thing here when it gets into advanced assemblies. It's what it does: top-down designs, family tables, blah, 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 blah. And, how large is your assembly? So again, if you guys, when we send this out, remember to look for the second tab. And I think there's some really good information there. And of course, we're always available if anybody needs our help.
Thanks, Garry.
All right, guys, have a great afternoon and great rest of your week.
Appreciate it. Appreciate everybody being on. Take
Thanks,
care.
guys. Take care. Thanks.